In the year 1157, a child was born inside a royal castle in England. Richard, son of King Henry II. He would become one of history's greatest kings. Richard the Lionheart. Born into royalty, Richard grew up surrounded by power, culture, and war. He was educated in language, music, and courtly life. But even as a child, his attention was drawn to the sword. As a teenager, Richard was given control of Aquitaine. It was a land filled with unrest and rebellion. Forced to lead at a young age, he began to face conflict head-on. Richard faced rebellion across Aquitaine, but unlike many kings, he fought at the front. And in battle, he proved himself not just a leader, but a warrior. In 1189, he was crowned King of England. Soon, all of Europe would know his name, Richard the Lionheart.
My king, the crusade awaits. We mark for Jerusalem.
Soon after becoming king, Richard turned his attention to war. Across Europe, armies gathered. The Third Crusade had begun. When Richard reached the Holy Land, the Crusader army had already been fighting for years. The campaign against Saladin was fierce and uncertain. But Richard quickly proved himself a brilliant battlefield commander.
And England! For God and England! Charge!
When Richard arrived at Acre, the siege had already dragged on for nearly 2 years. Crusader forces were exhausted, locked in a brutal stalemate against Saladin's army. But Richard brought fresh strength, new weapons, and ruthless determination. Under his command, the assault intensified. Siege engines pounded the walls, arrows darkened the sky, and the fighting grew relentless. Day after day, the defenders were pushed back. Richard led from the front, not as a distant king, but as a warrior in the chaos of battle. At last, the city could hold no longer. In 1191, Acre fell, a decisive victory, and the moment Richard the Lionheart truly took command of the crusade. With Acre secured, Richard marched south. His army moved along the coast, yet another epic battle awaited. In 1191, Richard faced the armies of Saladin at the Battle of Arsuf. Holding his forces in discipline, he waited for the perfect moment. Then, the Crusader cavalry struck with devastating force. Richard struck a deal with Saladin. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control, but Christian pilgrims would be allowed safe passage. With the war at a standstill, he turned for home, unaware his greatest trial still lay ahead. Richard set sail for home. The crusade had victories, but not Jerusalem. The Lionheart left the Holy Land behind, unaware the journey ahead would lead him into captivity. While sailing for home, the sea turned against them, driving them off course. Forced from the sea, they would now cross hostile lands. Travelling in disguise, Richard moved through hostile lands. But a king cannot remain unseen forever. Richard is spotted. Captured by the Duke of Austria, the Lionheart was taken prisoner, not in battle, but in betrayal. Richard was handed over to the Roman emperor and held in captivity. His freedom would come at a staggering price: 150,000 marks. So great it would drain the wealth of England itself. For England to gather this enormous ransom, taxes were levied, treasure gathered, even churches gave their wealth. Across the kingdom, the price was paid. The ransom was carried to secure the king's release. After a vast ransom was paid, Richard was finally released. The Lionheart was free once more. But his time in captivity had changed everything, and his battles were far from over. While imprisoned, his lands in France were being seized by Philip, King of France. No sooner than he was freed, the Lionheart rode to reclaim what had been taken, returning once more to war. In 1199, during a siege in France, it happened. A single crossbow bolt struck the Lionheart. The warrior king was brought down. Days after the wound, Richard's condition worsened. By his side was his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and there, far from the battlefields he had conquered, the Lionheart drew his final breath. Richard the Lionheart was a king of war, but also a legend of history. His battles may have ended, but his name would never be forgotten.